8,000 mountain warriors against 40,000 elite Ottoman soldiers. Those aren't victory odds, those are the numbers that appear in military textbooks as examples of catastrophic defeat and total annihilation. But on the 2nd of September 1457, in a fog-choked Albanian gorge called Albulena, something happened that military historians still study as perhaps the most perfectly executed ambush in medieval European warfare. And here's what will shock you. The Ottoman commander who led his army into this death trap was Skanderbeg's own nephew, a family betrayal that turned into one of history's most devastating military disasters. Picture this: the Ottoman Empire at the height of its power, fresh from conquering Constantinople 4 years earlier, sending an overwhelming force to crush the last Christian resistance in the Balkans. 40,000 battle-hardened troops, janissaries who had never been defeated, cavalry that had smashed every European army they'd faced, artillery that could reduce castles to rubble. They marched north with absolute confidence, laughing about how quickly they'd crush the Albanian rebels and claim their rewards. Facing them was Skanderbeg, a former Ottoman general turned rebel, commanding barely 8,000 men, most of them farmers and shepherds who'd never seen a formal battlefield. The Ottomans considered this campaign a formality, a hunting expedition to finish off a dying resistance. But Skanderbeg had chosen his ground carefully, prepared his trap meticulously, and was about to teach the Ottoman Empire that mountains remember everything, and mountains take revenge. To understand the impossible nature of what happened at Albulena, you need to know the man who made it possible. Gheorghe Castrioti, history knows him as Skanderbeg, had one of the most remarkable origin stories in medieval warfare. Born to Albanian nobility in 1405, he was taken hostage by the Ottomans as a child, part of the Devshirme system where Christian boys were forcibly converted to Islam and trained as elite soldiers. But unlike most who broke under this system, young Gheorghe thrived. The Ottomans called him Iskander Bey, Lord Alexander, comparing him to Alexander the Great because his military brilliance was evident even as a teenager. For 20 years, Skanderbeg served the Ottoman Empire as one of its most successful generals, commanding troops across the Balkans, winning battles that expanded Ottoman territory. He learned everything: Ottoman tactics, Turkish language, siege warfare, cavalry maneuvers, the inner workings of the empire's military machine. The Sultan trusted him completely. His future seemed assured: wealth, power, honor within the greatest empire on earth. But in 1443, everything changed. During a campaign in Hungary, Skanderbeg made a decision that would alter Balkan history. He deserted. Not quietly, but dramatically, he seized the fortress of Kruja, his ancestral Albanian stronghold, raised the black double-headed eagle flag of Albania, reconverted to Christianity, and declared war on the empire that had raised him. Can you imagine that level of betrayal from the Ottoman perspective? Their own general, trained in their methods, knowing all their secrets, now leading resistance against them? For the next 14 years, Skanderbeg became the Ottomans' worst nightmare, a guerrilla warfare genius who used mountain terrain to neutralize their numerical superiority. He won battle after battle through ambushes, night raids, scorched earth tactics, and intimate knowledge of Albanian geography. By 1457, he had humiliated the Ottoman Empire repeatedly, and Albania remained unconquered despite being surrounded by Ottoman territory. But resistance was taking its toll. The 1455 Battle of Berat had been a disaster. Skanderbeg, overconfident for once, had advanced too far and been trapped by Ottoman forces. His army was scattered, hundreds killed, his reputation for invincibility damaged. In the aftermath, Albanian morale plummeted. Allies abandoned him. Harvests failed from years of warfare. The kingdom was exhausted, bleeding, on the edge of collapse. Then came the betrayal that would lead directly to Albulena. Hamza Castrioti, Skanderbeg's own nephew, a young man he'd raised like a son after Hamza's father died, was ambitious, brilliant, and hungry for glory that seemed impossible to achieve in a dying Albanian resistance. Ottoman envoys approached him with seductive promises. Switch sides? Help us crush your uncle, and you'll receive titles, wealth, lands, everything denied to you in poor, war-torn Albania." The temptation was too much. In 1457, Hamza secretly traveled to Constantinople and knelt before Sultan Mehmed II, pledging loyalty to the Ottoman Crescent. The Sultan's response was direct: "Return to Albania, bring me your uncle's head, and I will make you lord of all these lands." The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was strategic catastrophe. Hamza knew Skanderbeg's tactics, his hideouts, his weaknesses. When news of Hamza's betrayal reached Skanderbeg, the old general's reaction was reportedly silence, a long, terrible silence that his officers found more frightening than any rage. He had lost family before, lost soldiers, lost battles. But losing his nephew to the enemy was a wound that cut deeper than any blade. Yet that wound would become fuel for the tactical genius he was about to display. In Constantinople, Sultan Mehmed II saw opportunity. Albania had resisted for too long, become a symbol that Christian resistance could succeed against Ottoman might. With Hamza's inside knowledge and a massive army, the Sultan would crush this resistance permanently. Orders went out across the empire: assemble the largest invasion force Albania had ever faced. Throughout spring 1457, the Ottoman war machine mobilized. From Macedonia to Anatolia, soldiers converged. 40,000 men assembled. The number itself was a statement of intent. This wasn't a raid or a punitive expedition. This was conquest and annihilation. The force included 15,000 janissaries, those elite infantry trained from childhood, considered the finest soldiers in the world. 10,000 Sipahi heavy cavalry, whose charges had broken European armies for a century. 5,000 light cavalry, primarily Tatars and Akinji raiders, perfect for mountain warfare. Plus archers, engineers, artillery, and thousands of support troops. The logistics alone were staggering. Feeding and moving such an army required hundreds of supply wagons, thousands of pack animals, a mobile city that consumed everything in its path. At the army's head rode Hamza Castrioti, given command despite his youth because he knew the terrain and his uncle's methods. Ottoman officers were confident to the point of arrogance. They'd crushed every enemy they'd faced. Constantinople, the impregnable city that had stood for 1,000 years, had fallen to them just 4 years earlier. What could a handful of Albanian mountain rebels do against such power? In their camps, soldiers joked about how they'd divide Albanian loot, what they'd do to Skanderbeg when they captured him. Some swore they'd bring him alive to Constantinople in chains. Others promised to burn every Albanian village until nothing remained but ashes and memory. The march north was triumphal, a show of overwhelming force meant to break enemy morale before the fighting even started. Banners stretched for miles. War drums beat constantly. The sound of their approach could be heard hours before they arrived, a psychological weapon designed to spread terror. Meanwhile, in the Albanian mountains, Skanderbeg received reports of the approaching doom. His council convened an emergency session at Kruge Fortress. The numbers were terrifying, 40,000 against perhaps 8,000 defenders at most, and those 8,000 were exhausted from years of warfare, poorly equipped, many just farmers with spears. Some counselors urged retreat into the highest mountains, avoiding battle entirely. Others suggested seeking terms perhaps Mehmed II would accept Albanian vassalage rather than total conquest. A few simply despaired, believing resistance was futile. Skanderbeg listened to all of this, his face betraying nothing. Then he stood, walked to the map table, and pointed to a narrow mountain valley his officers knew well. "Albulena," he said quietly. "We will meet them at Albulena. And there, the mountains will teach my nephew what family really means." The room fell silent as they realized what he was planning: not retreat, not surrender, but the most audacious ambush in Albanian history. The Valley of Albulena was perfect natural killing ground, and Skanderbeg knew every rock and tree. The gorge was narrow at points barely 200 yards wide, with steep forested slopes rising on both sides. A river ran through it, shallow but swift. The valley floor was relatively flat but enclosed, meaning large armies couldn't deploy in traditional formations. For the Ottomans' overwhelming numbers to matter, they needed open space to maneuver. Albulena would deny them that space.